What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about all the One Piece English booster boxes. One in particular on TCG Player has been absolutely popping off over the past 24 hours that we do need to talk about. But before we get into this, just one important thing I want to touch on. I did just arrive in Colombia, and unfortunately my checked bag through Avianca was lost or stolen. I don't know exactly what happened, so I know a lot of people have been trying to reach out to me through email, whether it's booking consult calls or just asking other questions. I've seen everything. You guys have messaged me. If you booked a consult, don't worry. It'll go forward at the time you booked for. But just getting back to everyone, I do try and, send confirmation emails and reply to everyone who sends me a message because I do appreciate people taking the time. I'm just going to need an extra 24 to 48 hours to get situated here. It's kind of an unfortunate situation. It is what it is, though. Let's get into the booster boxes. This is really why you guys are here. Romance Dawn, blue bottom booster boxes. Nothing really crazy to talk about since the last time we touched on this. No new sales on TCG Player. You did have a couple of Japanese boxes selling at $200, but nothing really important there. The white bottoms, we did have a couple sales here at $12.50 and $12.70. On eBay, if you guys watch the market updates, I think we saw sales up to $1,300 or $1,350. So this shouldn't be anything new for those people. I do think Romance Dawn booster boxes are just going to continue climbing. We're probably not getting any more on the market. A couple of these sets we can go through fairly fast here. Paramount War, really nothing super exciting to talk about in that 245, 250 range. Still a decent amount of supply that you could find on the secondary market, but it is dwindling every single month. Pillars of Strength were up to around $330 USD, and recent sales over the past week we're actually pushing towards $350 USD, which is kind of crazy in my eyes. I know that in terms of scarcity, there's probably a little bit less OPO3 out there compared to OPO2, but I do think that in the future, those sets will probably be a little bit closer percentage-wise than they currently are. Also, OPO4 Kingdoms of Intrigue, we're still in that like 240, 245 range as well. Recent sales are actually down into the 235, 236 range. Awakening the New Era, this is where things kind of get interesting. We're up to around $400 loose on this box. Lots of sales pushing this $399 range. I think we touched on this in a recent video. There's still a decent amount of supply you can buy, around $400 on TCG Player. eBay, I think prices are actually going up. You're now probably pushing like $430, $440 eBay North America, and there's not as many boxes listed. That said, if you guys are trying to get your hands on some OPO5, I would recommend one, checking your local Facebook groups. You could also check a national Facebook group if you don't mind paying for shipping. And then also check Shopify. Just search like OPO5, booster box, Awakening the New Era, booster box, whatever. Sort by lowest listed in your country. You'll probably find boxes cheaper than this. I actually just helped someone find some OPO5 for around 350, I think, USD, in that range, something like that. Maybe it was a little bit more, a little bit less, but you can still find boxes in North America below TCG Player price. Wings of the Captain, this is up to around $200 now. Pretty impressive little spike we've had going on the past month. Recent sales, 192, 195, in that range, whatever. Decent set. It wouldn't be my largest position, but I don't mind if you guys have some exposure to Wings of the Captain. Memorial Collection, EBO1, this is up to over $500 now, consistent sales. You can see today we had another two boxes move at $518 USD. I still love the fact that, this was one of the first things a lot of the gatekeepers tried to call me out on in One Piece. I said that this box, even after they reprinted the cards in PRBO2, this box would not crash in price like a lot of people thought it would. And since then, it's just gone up. It's just so funny seeing stuff like this because I know it bothers a lot of the people who hate the fact that sealed investments can actually appreciate in value over time. But this really is the best example of what a deflationary asset can do when you just, give it the time to mature, less of them on the market. And just in general, EBO1 didn't have a super large print cycle. And that's kind of why I think we're already at $500. Whereas if it got maybe like the EBO2 treatment, it might only be a $250, $300 booster box currently. And we will talk about EBO2 a little bit later in the video. OPO7, this is still dead money in my eyes. You can see here, over the past couple months, we've actually had like an uptick in sales volume and prices still staying the same. There's a lot of boxes out there. You can see here a lot of sales today, all in that 120 to 123 range. Just really not doing anything currently. Still some decent, interesting cards in there, but not enough to move the needle yet. Same thing with Two Legends. This had a decent run earlier this year. Got up to around $115 in the summer, which I think was probably an overshoot on TCG Player. We dropped back down sub 100, sitting around 107 currently. Still a ton of boxes out there. You guys who have the spreadsheet, you look at the info. We will be doing the next update, I believe Thursday this week or something. So we will be able to see how many boxes are on the secondary market. I imagine there's still going to be cases and cases and cases of Two Legends. Now, the star of this video is going to be PRB01. You guys know, I think this is a pretty solid set. You should have some exposure to this, even at like $400, $450. I was telling people to buy this for the long run. And you can see on TCG Player, we're up to around $526 currently. And a lot of that's come over the past week or so. We moved from around 450 up to this 526 range. But the interesting part is if you come in here and look, the most recent sales from today, $590, we had a couple boxes move, $650 and $648. Someone is clearly trying to move the price of this box up on TCG Player. I am curious to see on eBay what's going on over the next couple days. There's not a ton of boxes on eBay North America, and I think we're getting to the point where some people might start making a play on the For Asia PRB01. I've actually had a couple people reach out and ask me about that. I think that considering you can still get cases of the For Asia version for somewhere between like $3,500 and $5,000 USD. English cases, the North American release, we're probably going to be pushing like 7,000, 8,000 at this point, maybe even more. There might be a play there, in my opinion, not just short term, but also long term. So keep an eye on PRB01. We all know the God Packs in there, all the reprinted mangas. The Nami manga as well is just a pretty solid addition to the prior mangas Bandai had released. So super bullish on that. Also the Gold Dawns as well. Very cool cards from that set. OP09, I think this is another set a lot of people are interested in currently, sitting around $240 on TCG Player, and it's selling fairly consistently in this range. Still a decent amount of boxes out there. I would be very surprised if this just randomly shot up to like $280, $300. I do think it's going to take a little bit of time for the supply to get chewed through. Royal Blood, we're still sitting around $100 on TCG Player. This, like Two Legends, like OP07, in my eyes, it's still kind of dead money. A lot of boxes out there, just not a ton of super valuable, desirable chase cards. I still love a lot of the SPs in the set. I like the Sanji. I love the Whitebeard. I think the Charlotte Pudding is probably undervalued. But the unfortunate reality is that the Law manga is just not a huge card, and there's just way better places to put your money currently. Now, before we talk about EBO2, I did want to just jump in here and say something. Someone asked me to make a new tier list video. This is not really a tier list video. I am planning to do a new one probably early January. I actually said, I replied to their comments that I was going to do one this week. I thought it over. I think I'm just going to wait till the new year. Give it like 3 months in between updates, and I will add in the anniversary sets and some other sealed products when we do that new update. But if you guys are wondering where to put your money right now, it's kind of the same thing that I'm always going to say is if you're in this for the long term, you should be focusing on just building positions in the best sets. Obviously, my ranking is going to be dependent on current price at the time of recording that video, and also just depending on what's available to me in the market. But if you guys are in this for 5 years, 10 years, you shouldn't be worried about buying EBO2 at $230 versus $250 versus $270. It's really not going to make that big of a difference in the long run. So if you do want some short-term advice before that video comes out in the new year, just focus on the best sets, focus on the ones that have desirable cards that people want, they're willing to pay up for, whether it's the raw copy, a graded copy, whatever. Start building positions in those, hold long term, you'll be absolutely fine. But looking at EBO2 shortly, we're actually up to $250 now on TCG Player, which I think is a huge milestone. And if we do the 1 year chart, this is all pre-release stuff, so ignore this. But after release, We did drop down for about a month or two, but since then, it's just been a straight line upwards on EBO2. Super deep set in here. I know that a lot of those SP cards are going to have value, but we've seen the alternate art Luffy come up in price over the past couple months. The Boa Hancock has been making a run. And of course, the Luffy manga. I mean, this is up to what, $4,500, almost $5,000 in a BGS 10. The PSA 10, I imagine it's probably going to start pushing $4,000 soon, guys. So keep an eye on EBO2. If you don't already have a position, I would recommend making this probably one of your top priorities, in my opinion. Even buying this over OP13 if you don't have any. I think there's going to be opportunities over the next 12 months to get your hands on OP13, where something like EBO2, as the months go by, I doubt it's going to get a reprint. There's going to be less and less of it out there. We're already seeing stores in Canada that maybe a month ago were at like 260 Canadian. Now they're up to like 300, 320 Canadian. So just every single day, it's getting more difficult to find, and you're gonna have to pay up if you want to get your hands on this product. And a couple more sets here to close out the video. OP11, we're already back up to around $167 on TCG Player. Lots of boxes still moving in this range. It's still fairly easy to find this product, but with the gold and silver Luffy's in there, and like Luffy manga and some of the other cards, it's a no-brainer. You should have some exposure to OP11. I would not be surprised if in 2026 this is above $200 per box. OP12, I have a little bit of exposure to this. It's not my favorite set. I think if you were buying this at like $80 a box back in October, that was an absolute no-brainer. I still don't think at $80 it was the best investment over like a 5-year period if we're imagining what the annualized ROI is going to be, but you have essentially zero downside risk buying a set at that price. Not to mention a lot of the top cards like the gold and silver Blackbeard and also the Jewelry Bonding manga actually have some value to them. They're not the cheapest cards in the world, which means that these boxes will have some level of value in the future. So if you own OP12, it's a definite hold in my opinion. And if a reprint does come, these boxes drop back down to like $80 again in the future, I would recommend on picking up more. Now, PRBO2, this set's kind of going under the radar. There's just so much going on with OP13, some of these other sets like 11 and PRBO1, etc. People aren't really paying too much attention to PRBO2. The Sanji manga, we're sitting around 3.5K in a PSA 10 currently. You have the Gum Gum Giant and all the other manga event rares in there. Some of those top SPs and super rares and stuff. There's a lot of value in the set. We're sitting around $172 currently on TCG Player. A lot of sales actually getting closer to 180. I think that this will be in the 200s as well going into 2026. I definitely don't recommend making PRBO2 your largest investment position, but if you don't have exposure to the set, I would recommend picking up at least a little bit of it. Get a booster box. If you're building a really large position, you could get a case like myself. I think that it's a decent set to diversify into that also has really good long-term potential. And speaking of long-term potential, we'll close out the video talking about OP13. I'm sure a lot of you guys have opened this already or you're paying attention to it. There really isn't much to say here for OP13. If you guys don't have exposure, I would absolutely recommend getting some exposure to OP13 and going into it with the investment to dollar cost average over the next 2 years. If we get reprints on OP13, even 3 years, like, you know, Bandai could change the rules at any time. Up to this point, they haven't really given us a ton of reprints for older sets. I think someone left a comment maybe like a month ago on my video saying that we would get a reprint a few months after release, get some more cards out there, especially if it's a very meta product like OP13 will be. So I do expect more to come next year, but I would not be surprised in the future if Bandai starts to give us more print runs going into like the 18-month, 24-month window after release of a set, especially a set as deep and as popular as OP13. But even if that happens, I think when you look at this set 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the value in those Red Luffy mangas, the Ace mangas, the Sabo mangas, the Gold and Silver Shanks, there's just going to be so many cards that people want to chase. It seems like an absolute no-brainer. It's going to be very difficult to go wrong with this product. But of course, that is just my opinion. If you guys disagree, feel free to leave a comment down below. If you did get some value out of this video, I'd really appreciate if you leave a like, subscribe to the channel. It does genuinely help out a ton getting these videos pushed out to more people. Also, if you guys are shopping eBay, TCG Player, Hobbiesville, absolutely no pressure, but I do have affiliate links in the description down below. They're free and easy to use. All you have to do is click on the link before you do your shopping. I'll get a small percentage of that sale at no extra cost to you. So it's a free and easy way to support the channel. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching the video. Stay safe wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you in the next one.